Welcome to There Is Only Lore, where we cover all the history, factions, time periods, and general knowledge of a range of topics, the primary being, of course, Warhammer 40,000. At this time, I would like to place the disclaimer here that all content hereby discussed is the intellectual property of Games Workshop, and any comments or predictions made in this series of videos are made by those who made those aforementioned comments or predictions and in no way reflect the views and standing of Games Workshop or any of its constituent parts. Alright, now that we have that out of the way, let us begin. This video will discuss the war game, which is merely meant to introduce new players or those interested about the background and general knowledge of the tabletop game, the story of Warhammer 40,000, and the hobby. For those of you already well immersed into any and all aspects, this video is not by any means meant to be a starting point in the series of videos. There Is Only Lore is a series dedicated to giving you, the viewers, some background information about the war game and all aspects therein. Warhammer 40,000, sometimes referred to as Warhammer 40k or simply 40k, is a tabletop miniatures war game developed by Games Workshop, currently, at least at the posting of this video, in its 7th edition run. In the game, players control armies of models representing various soldiers, vehicles, monsters, and the various heroic, or villainous characters that lead them into battle. It's a game about strategy, moving your troops into viable positions and using the terrain to your advantage to crush your opponent, whether with a hail of gunfire or in the crucible of close-quarters combat. As for the story of Warhammer 40,000, it is the close of the 41st millennium, and the Imperium of Man, a massive galaxy-spanning empire with close to 1 million human-inhabited worlds within its borders, is on the verge of collapse. For the past 10,000 years, it has kept its multitudinous enemies at bay, under constant threat by hostile alien species who seek to enslave or eradicate mankind, and within its own borders by heretics and rebels who seek to overthrow the Imperium for their own petty power grabs, or those who freely consort with dark gods and foul demons and seek to rip the very fabric of reality asunder. It is through the sacrifice of the man known only as the Emperor and the might of his inexhaustible armies that keeps these foes from exterminating mankind forever. 10,000 years ago, the Emperor walked among men, a living demigod who reunited the disparate worlds of humanity under the banner of the Imperium of Man. However, in a moment of treachery that nearly ripped the newly formed Imperium in two, half of the Emperor's standing forces turned their backs upon his teachings and rebelled, nearly destroying all that the Emperor had worked so hard to achieve. The rebellion, known as the Horus Heresy, was thankfully stopped, but at terrible cost. Many worlds were ravaged beyond salvation, and many more were in open rebellion, and the Emperor mortally wounded and is barely kept alive through constant sacrifice of humans with nascent psychic powers known as Psychers, that the Emperor continues to exist, though merely as a shell of his former self. Even though the Emperor is unable to walk among men and is bound to the confines of the Golden Throne, humanity endures, though as a mockery of the great empire the Emperor strove to create. Even with all the dangers within and without, the Imperium is far from helpless. From the trillions of fighting men in the Astra Militarum to the god machines of the Titan legions to the shadowy Inquisition, the Imperium has the tools and men needed to fight their enemies on all fronts. However, the enemies of man are many, and the forces of the Imperium are being pushed back step by step. Whether the Imperium can survive or not is up to the players who fight the battles within the Dark Millennium. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. The hobby is possibly one of the most inspirational of why players start the game. Looking at some of the most creatively modeled and beautifully painted ones is more than enough to inspire other wargamers into painting and modeling in general, not just Warhammer 40,000. I can't discuss too much into detail about the painting part of the hobby, but I will cover it in further detail in another series of videos I call 100 Paints Later. Personally, nothing is more enjoyable than building and painting an army of miniatures to fight battles in the 41st millennium and determine the fate of an entire galaxy. As I have mentioned before, There Is Only Lore is merely meant as an introduction to this segment of videos, so there is only general knowledge in this video at the specific time. And it may seem like I'm focusing a lot on the Imperium of Man, I just don't want to reveal too much about the Xeno and Renegade forces because I will be covering them in further detail in future videos. So, no worries! In the meantime, Wargamers, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of There Is Only Lore. I'll see you later.